And folks, Chief Meteorologist Nick Lilliga here with your tropical update brought to you by Tropical Pool and Spa. We're in the Severe Weather Forecasting Center back here, trying to nail down everything that's going on in the tropics as things have gotten pretty active over the last about 72 hours. A peek into the Gulf of Mexico does show some convection out into the central Gulf on the tail end of a little, I guess you'd call it a little short wave associated with an upper level low. We'll get back to that here in a couple of seconds, but generally the flow out there is from north to south. It's as we look out into the Atlantic that things are really warming up, both literally and figuratively. We've got one area here, we've got Florence there, we've got Invest 92L here, and potential tropical cyclone 8 there. So 4 different things out there, and then the one little spinny deal in the Gulf of Mexico. And then we've got what's left over of Gordon just off to our northwest. So first things first, Tropical Storm Florence, wind at 65 miles an hour, gusting to 75, moving to the west at 8. Anticipated to re-strengthen to a hurricane and eventually be back to a Category 3 or 4 by the time it gets a little bit closer to the east coast of the United States. I still think this is something that here in the Gulf of Mexico we don't need to worry about yet. But we do need to keep an eye on, because that southernmost track in that forecast cone does lead it to a point where, unfortunately, given the upper level winds, it would have a better chance of bringing us a little bit of weather. A direct impact from a Category 4 from this thing, the chances are, in the 0.000% somewhere. But I suppose, Lloyd, I'm telling you, there's a chance. So there's that. At very, very low, I think this is an East Coast threat, and even the threat on the East Coast, I think, is currently still being massaged out by the good folks at the National Hurricane Center. We've got potential tropical cyclone 8 also out here, with wind at 35, gusting to 45. This is 440 miles off to the east-southeast of the Cabo Verde Islands. This one looks to be moving more westerly, but this is going to curve off to the north, despite the fact that it's probably only ever going to get to tropical storm, hurricane, Category 1 hurricane status before it starts the turn. It's probably going to end up where Florence is now, but due to the changing stuff happening in the atmosphere, we don't anticipate it to take the same track, and we'll show that here in a second, that Florence is taking right now. This is a Cabo Verde Islands problem and an open sea problem. Not an us problem. And then we've got Invest 92L out here, still with a 90% chance of development from the next 2 to 5 days. And unfortunately, this one's just not moving quickly. We've been talking about that the last couple of days. It's currently only moving at about 3 miles an hour. And most of the forecast models, and I've dropped them all onto this map, like every single one that I have access to is on here. They all take it into the Caribbean as we head through the next 5 to 7 days. A couple of them curve it off to the north and have it strengthening rapidly, but those ones that don't take it into the Caribbean, unfortunately, for us, and that puts us in a situation where that's the one that we need to watch. There's yet another area to watch. The chances for development here, 10 to 20%. And that's just off to the southwest of Bermuda. This one, depending on the prevailing winds, will either be a problem for the East Coast or for the Bahamas or for the Northeast. We're still trying to figure that one out. Because this thing's pretty loosely organized, it's tough for the model. With the storms that were firing up in the central Gulf, there are some indications that these may drift down here and kind of curlicue back to the north and end up as a problem for southern Texas. But we'll have to see exactly what happens out there. We've got enough on our plate already. So here's what the 700 millibar moisture, 850 vorticity is saying. You've got a couple of different things out here to look at. You've got Florence. Here we go. Usually I'm standing on the green screen, so I can kind of point some of these things out. You've got Florence here, Invest 92L here, potential tropical cyclone 8 here, that 10 to 20% chance here, and that stuff in the Gulf which isn't highlighted here yet, but I think you'll see pop up here in the next little bit. So there goes Florence, Invest 92L, and potential tropical cyclone 8. We've got another wave that comes off the African coast here. You can start to see maybe something happening with that convection there. And this is as of Tuesday of next week. I think by the time we get to Wednesday, Thursday, whatever ends up happening with Florence happens, unfortunately, somewhere between, I think, maybe the Georgia-South Carolina line all the way up to the Delmarva. You've got Invest 92L continuing to drift its way kind of this direction, and potential tropical cyclone 8 or Helene eventually lifting here. You've got the one coming off Africa lifting there as well. And then as we head through Friday and into Saturday, you still have 92L here. I would argue it's probably going to have a name by this point, and that would be Isaac. And then Florence is a northeast problem. Helene is out here in the middle of nowhere. That other wave is out here in the middle of nowhere. And then we calm down a little bit as yet another wave comes off the east coast of Africa. So things are getting active in the tropics on September 7th of 2018. There's your tropical update brought to you by Tropical Pool and Spa.